So tonight we're finishing the book of Judges, and as I subtitle it, How to Mess Up a Good Thing. Did Israel have a good thing going at Judges chapter 1? They sure did. At the end of Joshua, did they just not have so much positive momentum going as a culture? It reminds me a lot of the end of World War II. And all the American soldiers came back. We'd won the war. We won 2 wars decidedly. No question about it. Okay? Hitler's dead, and in Germany is just in rubble. And a humongo mushroom cloud just went up over Hiroshima. And, we decidedly won 2 wars. And so soldiers come back. There'd been a huge industrial boom because, hey, we need bombs and we need tanks. And so all of a sudden, for those people that weren't out there fighting the war, all of a sudden jobs started cropping up for those who weren't fighting the war because we had to keep the war machine moving. So there's money. GIs come back, and the government, in order to try to get them going, they gave them what they call the GI Bill. And so now all of a sudden, if you need a loan to get a house, and really where we're living right now, Riverside, California, is one of those communities which sprung up after World War II. It existed before World War II as groves, and, you're growing oranges and walnuts and junk. But really, all those homes, like in the wood streets and everything, that are built like in the early 50s and the late 40s and all that stuff, those are all guys coming back from World War II. They got their GI Bill. And you know what? I seen the world, Ma. I seen the world, Pa. I've been in dang old Bastogne, France. I can't come back to the farm and stand behind the bad side of a mule and plow anymore. I want a life for my own. I want my own home. And all of a sudden, you saw the breakdown of the American farms, and you saw the advent of the suburbs. And really, someday, it's not going to be long, San Diego and L.A. are just going to be Lan Diego. It's going to be one huge, because the suburbs have started sprawling, and they're still sprawling. And eventually, it's going to come to a point where they meet. And then where are we going to go? I don't know. But the point is that, man, what an age of expansion that it was. But now we think about not just the expansion, which is still going on from post-World War II America, but now we look morally at what was happening in post-World War II America. A guy would go to work, he'd come home, his wife would wear white gloves, and she'd have the pressed, dress, and she would make bake the cakes and the pies, and he'd come home, and it would just be all like Ward and June Cleaver, and it was just like, look at it. I mean, television, when it first came out, Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke slept in twin beds. Each of them had their own bed because the network censors were so afraid of the idea that people in America would see a man and a woman together in bed. So there's a twin bed here, and there's a twin bed here, and there's a nightstand, and they'd say, "Good night, honey," and they'd turn the light off in between. They'd both roll to separate sides, and that was it. You always wonder, well, how'd they get them kids? That's for when we teach Song of Solomon. No, but the point is, look at the level of morality and how it was in the 1950s, right after the war, when there was a huge boom and people come back from the war and there's so much positive. I mean, we were stinking developing America. We were the powerhouse in the world. We lent and did not borrow. And Europe's over there with brooms and shovels, and they're trying to put their thing together, and we're like building and partying. I mean, it was really like the first part of Judges, last part of Joshua. We were taking the land. Before I came here, I saw a comment on Fox News. A lady had written a book, and she was talking about Jersey Shore. And they were talking about how different is Jersey Shore from the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, are you serious? And the point was, while technically we are advancing, morally we've been spiraling. So you say, well, where were we at World War II? Well, the automobile was kicking it. Electricity was pretty much in most houses. Indoor plumbing was in most houses. We had all those things. Television had yet to be invented, but was about to be by 1955. A lot of homes would have televisions in them, technologically, in medicine, gosh, I don't know that you really wanted to get cancer. Smallpox was still an issue, right? I mean, polio was still an issue. They hadn't fully, completely conquered those types of diseases, much less the diseases that we fight with today. They didn't have the methods and the techniques. There was no MRI. X-ray was still pretty sketchy. It's like men couldn't even be in there when a woman was giving birth. I mean, so look where we've come technologically. It's amazing. Now there's the advent of, I remember just in my lifetime waking up as a kid, and I've talked about it, that we had 3 channels of television, right? It came on at 6 a.m., and it stopped at midnight. There was no television from midnight to 6 a.m. If you turned on the television, you had a sideways view of an Indian and color bars. And that's if you had a color television. Not everybody I knew had a color TV. And that was it. And I would wake up as a kid. I didn't even know what time it was. I couldn't tell time. I'm a stupid kid. And I would sit there and I would look at the TV, and all I would hear was that test tone and see that Indian's head and those color bars, and it would just go. I don't know how many hours I just sat there staring, because I knew that at some point it's going to cut and the Blue Angels are going to fly over and they're going to play the Star-Spangled Banner. Am I right? I'm right. And after the Star-Spangled Banner, cartoons are going to come on Saturday morning. Look at where we are now. We just got Netflix for the Wii. And my wife has to now shut down the Netflix, because the first couple of days that we had it, my wife is like, Steve, do you realize that this doesn't have parental controls like a television does, where you could block certain channels? And she's like, so now I have to literally shut the whole thing down. If my kids want to watch something, they have to come to me and ask me, can I watch this program? And I have to turn it on for them, because I don't want them to know the secret number. And I have to turn it on for them. And they can watch it, but I got to really watch the clock too, because those aren't actually 30 minutes. Because when there's no commercials, a 30-minute show is only like 20 minutes. So she's like, then I got to think, I got to get back in there before the next thing comes on, or before they choose something else for themselves. And my daughter Ruth, who's 13 years old, she's crying when my wife says, hey, listen, I'm going to have to put a parental guide on this whole thing, and you're going to have to come to me anymore whenever you want to watch something. And she cries. She says, Mom, you don't trust me. You don't trust me. And my wife said the most profound thing. She said a lot of profound things. She said the most profound thing I've heard in a long time. She said, honey, it's not my job to trust you. It's my job to protect you. I trust you with all kinds of things, but you're still not getting the code. Because my job is not to trust you. My mandate from the Lord did not say to me, Misty, now you better above all things trust your children. Until they've proven to you that they're not trustworthy, they have a right for your trust. And you can't take that trust away from them until they've proven to you that they don't deserve it. My wife is like, honey, do you understand that with some of the things that are on the free Netflix, you pay like $10 a month and you get unlimited movies? She's like, do you understand that there's some things on there that if you see them one time, if you see them a fraction of a second, the image is burned into your mind. That it could literally be a lifetime of struggle with that one image. And take you out of it. What if it's Wyatt? Or what if it's Olivia? Or what if it's poor little Asher and he's just there and something comes on, you're like, whoa, and I turned it off real quick because I knew I wasn't supposed to see that. And now these are the things that we have to struggle with, that they didn't struggle with post-World War II. Yeah, we're advancing technologically. Matter of fact, China's really kicking up their space program. I think they did it on purpose, quite frankly. They shot a rocket off today, and they were talking about how they're going to use this, with their astronauts, in order to start dealing with the space station on the very last voyage of ours, because we're shutting ours down. Why? Oh, man, moon, been there, done that, got a collection of rocks. We invented a bunch of cool stuff. People say, what's NASA good for? I'll tell you what they're good for. You ever use Velcro? NASA invented Velcro. You ever use a microwave? NASA invented a microwave. Okay? You ever drink Tang? NASA invented Tang. You ever write one of them pens upside down? NASA invented that too. NASA's smart. Did you know that the Israeli Air Force had the same, their space program, they had the same issue that we had, where they had to develop a pen that could write in zero gravity, and they had to have a device that would write in zero gravity, it would write upside down, and so we spent like all these millions of dollars and we invented the space pen, which you could buy at Staples now, the Fisher Space Pen. You know what the Israelis did? They used a pencil. There's been great technological advancements since World War II. But morally, as a nation, we're going down the tubes. And we don't realize it until we stop and we go look at Nick at Night or TV Land, and it just seems comical to look at I Love Lucy and to look at those, the honeymooners and all that stuff, and to look at that and to think, did anybody actually get entertained by that? It was just so vanilla and white bread. I love those shows. The guy who created the Brady Bunch in Gilligan's Island died today. Sherwood Schwartz was his name. Interestingly enough, people complained about the Brady Bunch. Why? Because Mike and Carol Brady slept in the what? They slept in the same bed on a TV show. And they complained about Gilligan's Island. Why? Because Mary Ann wore some short shorts and Ginger kind of low-cut tops. Now we laugh at those things because we look at the stuff that's on TV today and you say, are you serious? Did all these women want to date Flavor Flav? And the things that they'll do to prove that they're worthy to be his woman. It's ridiculous. Technologically, we're off the map. But morally, we're in the tubes. And so we can relate. This is one of the books that we can actually relate to in the Bible. Of man, how far have they fallen by the end of Judges? And the writer of the book of Judges knows this. And so he's really saving the best for last. Or shall I say, the worst for last. Judges chapter 19. We're going to finish this book tonight. The writer of Judges is insistent on showing the depravity of God's people. And everyone in this story is twisted. Except for one guy. And we'll get to him later. And it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. And he took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. The writer of Judges, on 3 different occasions, underscores the fact that during these times there was no king in Israel. We're going to deal with Judges now. We're going to talk about Ruth because Ruth happened during the times of the Judges. Okay? So we're going to finish Judges, then we're going to tell a little story about Ruth because it happened during the time of the Judges. We know this because the Bible says that in the very first couple of verses. And then we're going to talk about 1st and 2nd Samuel and when Israel finally gets a king. And we're going to find out later that Israel's problem was not that they didn't have a king. Israel's problem was they didn't have the right kind of king. It came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. And he took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. We don't know why he didn't just get himself a wife. Why in the world would he take a concubine instead of having a wife? But like we said, we're living in jacked up times in Israel. And to this very day, I would say that most guys, and quite frankly, many guys who go to church, when they go out on Friday and Saturday nights, they're not looking for a wife. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for a concubine. They're looking for somebody they can party with, have a good time with. Maybe, why would you have to buy the cow if you get the free milk? So they just kind of want a girl that they can hang with. I don't know Christian girls. Am I the only guy that has seen this? Where you can go to college groups and you can go to Bible studies and there's probably certain Bible studies that you stay away from. Why? Because it's just a meat market. Those guys are all just looking for girls. And it's just so hard to find one that just honors the Lord. So I don't even go to that Bible study anymore. Because I can't trust any of the guys that are there that they have the right motives. Believe it or not, there are still Levites today who are looking for concubines. They're not necessarily looking to live a life which honors the Lord. They're just really looking for a nice Christian girl that they can get to compromise with them to the level that they're compromising their faith. I know I'm not the only person that sees that. But his concubine, as concubines will do, when your relationship is not built on a godly relationship, but rather is built on what concubines are built for, then eventually your concubine is going to leave you in favor of a better caregiver. Man, I'm being so mitigated tonight. I should go to a seeker church. I'm not using any of the street language that I'm thinking. By God's grace. But his concubine played the harlot against him. How dare she? There's an old country song, have you left the one you left me for? His concubine played the harlot against him, and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for 4 whole months. Well, that's a long time for your concubine to not come back. And who knows exactly why he didn't immediately go after her, but eventually he did. She was there for 4 months, and finally he says, you know what, I'm going to go get her. And then it says here, her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and to bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. I think it's interesting that the Bible uses the word husband. Does your Bible use the word husband? Isn't it interesting? You notice in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, it's talking about, Rahab, and it's talking about Ruth, and it's talking about Tamar, and then it talks about a lady who was the wife of Uriah. Remember her name? Bathsheba. But in Matthew chapter 1, it doesn't call her Bathsheba, it calls her Uriah's wife. It doesn't call her Solomon's mommy. It doesn't give her any level of dignity. As a matter of fact, it puts her together with Moabites and hookers. And calls her as she is in the eyes of God. It's interesting. You may take for yourself a concubine, but isn't that one of the great lies of the Bible? To say, oh, she's just my sister. But then you're actually living like you're married. You may take a concubine, but then the Lord sees that and he says, oh yeah, and then her husband went to go get her. Why? Because that relationship is the relationship between a husband and a wife. Okay? It doesn't mean that they're legally married. Although when I was a kid growing up in Arkansas, when it came time for prom, they said, when you get a hotel room, it was never a question of if you get a hotel room. When you get a hotel room, they told us in school, make sure that if you get a hotel room in Oklahoma, that you don't be joking around and register yourself as Mr. and Mrs. Wiggins. Because if you do, in the state of Oklahoma, if you declare that you're married, you're legally married. A mental note. He takes a concubine. The Bible in chapter 3 says, then her husband arose and went back with her to speak kindly to her and to bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So she brought him into her father's house. And when her father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. Wow. Like before I got married to my wife, I met her family. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him. And he stayed with him for 3 days. So they ate and they drank and they lodged there. Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose in the morning, and he stood to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterwards go your way. So they sat down, and the two of them ate and drank together. And then the young woman's father said to the man, please be content to stay all night, and let your heart be glad. And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. And then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. But the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. So they delayed until the afternoon, and both of them ate. This is very Jewish. You know, it's almost like, oh, come on, stay a little longer, eat something, come on, you know. Just keep on staying and staying. And the Bible says, then he arose early in the morning, verse 8. But the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, look, the day is now drawing towards evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here, that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow you can go your way early, so that you may get home. Take a really long look at this father, because he's the only guy who's righteous in the whole story. And when I say righteous, he's the only guy with whom we find no fault. It's interesting when you're living on the fence between serving the Lord and serving the world, how you can't ever really be happy to be with the people of the Lord. You go to church because you know you should, and there's something in it for you, but you can never really fully commit yourself to those people, because there's something in your heart and your spirit that doesn't quite connect with them when you have determined for yourself to live a sinful life. You can be among them, you can laugh at their jokes, you can eat their food, but you can never really have true fellowship because they are determined to follow the Lord and you're determined to just kind of follow Him around. But at the same time, when you go to the world, you can't really have the real relationship with the world that you really desire to have either. Because the truth is that while I love drinking with you guys and you guys are great, is it okay? Can we pull that shade right now? Okay, right. Because I don't want anybody from church to drive by and to look into your window and see me in here partying with you guys. I can't really fully, completely give myself to you and to the party. Because I've determined to kind of follow the Lord. I mean, I think the Bible talks about this kind of people when it talks in the Revelation about the church of Laodicea. You're neither hot nor cold. You're not pagans, and at the same time, you're not really on fire for me. And I feel like this Levite was one of those guys. He's a Levite, so obviously he's a priest. He has a priestly calling. But at the same time, he can't really stay settled with this guy. And from what I see, he seems like a really nice guy. He's the kind of father-in-law I wish I had. Stay longer. This is great. Be merry. Come on. But for whatever reason, now it's an inopportune time. It's the wrong time to leave. But for whatever reason, the Levite is determined, you know what? I can't stay here. And I can't hang with you any longer. Now, Stephen and I talked with a couple of others. Paul was just you and me and Paul. No, it was a bunch of people, Jamin, whatever. We were all sitting around talking on Monday about this whole idea. And it's true that in the Middle Eastern culture, at least at that time, that, you know, if you want to stay with somebody, you can stay with them 3 days. But really, after 3 days, you kind of worn out your hospitality. Okay? It's kind of a Bedouin thing, you know? And so to go past 3 days and then into 4, it's almost like, you know what, I don't want to make this 6 days because I've like doubly overstayed my welcome. We're not sure exactly what the reason is, but the point is that he chose to not stay with the guy who was obviously being very gracious to him. And then when he chose to leave, he ended up leaving at a time which was not the prudent time to be leaving. Had he left the next morning, he literally could have made it all the way to his journey. But he didn't. There's a tragic flaw in this guy, and I think we're going to find out a little more about it later. Verse 10, however, the man was not willing to spend the night, so he arose and departed and came opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. Let's stop for a second. You go, well, Jerusalem, that's in the land of Judah. Not yet. Remember, it was supposed to be one of the cities that they were going to take during the days of Joshua, but they didn't take it. Remember Caleb and his whole thing? Yeah, I'm as strong as I ever was. I was one of the 2 spies that came back and gave a good report. So me and Joshua got to go in, and everybody else of our generation died. And you know what? Give me those hills. Give me those hills up there, and I'm going to take those hills, and I'm as strong as I ever was. And we look at that, and we cling to that, and we teach in men's conferences about, hey, that's the kind of man that we should be. We should be godly men who trust in the Lord. And even no matter what our age is, we don't trust in our youthfulness, and we're not afraid of getting older because our strength is always in the Lord. But what we don't remember is that if you keep reading through the passage, you realize, but they didn't take Jerusalem because the people, the Jebusites, or Jebus, the people who lived there in Jerusalem, they were too strong for them. And so they settled around it. Jerusalem wasn't conquered until a little boy who grew up to be a pretty amazing king, a guy named David, showed up. David was the man who finally, on behalf of Judah, conquered Jerusalem. He says, we're near Jebus, and the day was far spent, and the servant said, this is verse 11, to his master, come please, and let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites to lodge in it. But his master said to him, we will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah. It's interesting. He didn't want to stay with the father, who was obviously family, who was being very generous to them. But at the same time, his spiritual pride and maybe his common sense said, you know, I can't go to Jerusalem either. I can't be with the pagans. I can't live with family. I can't live with the pagans. And so now he's in a dilemma. And what's interesting is that he doesn't go to Jerusalem because he's concerned that they're pagans. Not only he's concerned that these pagan people will defile me, but have we seen what Israel has done? They've conquered the land. And now here's a stronghold of their enemies. What's he going to do? I mean, the Levite's going to show up with his donkey and his concubine and his servant, and he's going to be all, hey, just checking the place out. You know, we're going to be coming here to conquer eventually because God said this place is ours, so can we stay the night? No, he can't do that practically. But now you see the dilemma that he's in. And if you look at the greater narrative, this is morally and spiritually where Israel is. He can't go into Jebus. Why not? Because Judah had not fulfilled the call of the Lord and driven out the people in Jerusalem. So because of the greater sin of Judah, he doesn't have a place to spend the night that night. And at the same time, he doesn't want to stay back with his family. He's going to go to Gibeah. Let's see how he does. Let's see how he does there. Verse 13. So he said to his servant, come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah. Steve pointed out, Saul was born in Gibeah. Samuel, right, was born in Ramah. So if you understand the history of Israel, Saul or Samuel, now he's got a place to stay. And it's interesting to me that he chose Gibeah, which is where Saul is from. And later, when we read the end of this, we'll maybe get a better insight as to the culture that Saul was brought up in, and why he may have been a man who was bent towards witchcraft. Verse 14. And so they passed by and they went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. Well, here's more family. I mean, the greater is one of the tribes. We should do well in the land of Benjamin. They turned aside there to go in to lodge at Gibeah. And when they went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one would take them into his house to spend the night. Later, we're going to read about a man and a woman who was pregnant, who was in Bethlehem, and they couldn't find anybody that would take them in either. Do you remember that story? Verse 15, so they turned aside to go into lodge at Gibeah. When he sat down in the open square of the city, no one would take them into his house to spend the night. Just then an old man came in from his work in the field that evening, and who also was from the mountains of Ephraim. And he was staying in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. So you have a Levite from the mountain country of Ephraim, and now he meets up in Gibeah with an old man who was also from the mountain country of Ephraim. Well, that sounds great. I found a homeboy here in the foreign land. Verse 18, so he said to him, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judea towards the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. But there is no one who will take me into his house. Although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself, and for your female servants, and for the young man who was with your servant, there is no lack of anything. And the old man said, peace be with you. Shalom. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square. I will tell you right now, if Stephen King were ever to make a movie about a story in the Bible, to me this seems like the perfect one. Because is that not creepy? Is it just not creepy? Especially because we've read Genesis 19. You remember what happens in Genesis 19? Remember, Lot had departed from Abraham, and he's living in a suburb of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he's getting closer, and then he's getting closer, and by a certain amount of time, now he's actually living in Sodom and Gomorrah. So 3 angels go up, and they meet with Abraham, and then they make their way down to Sodom and Gomorrah to check things out. Abraham's pleaded with them. You know the story. God, if it was 100 people, would you save it? If it was 50, if it was in a great negotiation, one of the great negotiations of the world. He gets it all the way down to a certain number, and finally they said, okay, enough. We get your point. You want Lot to be saved. So then they go down there, and then what happens is the nighttime comes. Lot's taken them into his house, and the wicked men of the city wanted to sleep with the angels. They were so beautiful. They were so wonderful. And yet, it was so wicked. And so Lot is like, hey, you know what? Just give him my virgin. I've got virgin daughters. Take these virgin daughters of mine, but don't sleep with these guys. And then, of course, we know the rest for Sodom and Gomorrah. Boom, boom, boom. That's fire and brimstone. And now here in the book of Judges, the writer is painting the same picture. If I was an enemy of Israel and I got a hold of the Bible, I would be really happy about this. Why? Because the Bible is telling Israel about the most wicked light that you could see it. I'm Jewish. I go and lead music at a Messianic synagogue on Saturday mornings. Every Saturday I'm there. Okay? And it's one of the great ones because so many Jewish believers go there. And there's a lot of Jewish non-believers who also go there because they share the parking lot with the Orthodox synagogue, the Chabad Center. They share a parking lot. So we see them walking, black coats, curls, the whole thing. They're walking to go to synagogue, and we're just turning left and going into where we're talking about Yeshua, the Messiah. And sometimes for whatever reason, they make it over to here. And sometimes they hear the gospel and they believe. It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. One of the things that's frustrating, though, is going to a Messianic congregation and you see a bunch of Gentiles dressing up like Jews. These are Gentiles. I mean, do you think God made a mistake when He made you? Oh, man, there's another one. Well, I don't know. Let's put him in Costa Rica. I don't know. What do we do with all these rejects? God didn't make a mistake when He made you a Gentile. So now why do you have to dress up and be a Jew? And then they end up becoming like Judaizers, and they become even more Jewish than real Jews who believe in the Messiah, who've been set free from all that junk, all the man-made stuff. You hate it, the poser aspect of it all. I don't hold Jewish people in higher esteem than any other people. A believer is a believer, no matter what nationality they're from. And a non-believer is a non-believer, no matter what their DNA says. Okay? Does that mean God's plan's over for the Jewish people? Absolutely not. Read Romans chapter 11. It says, hey, if their falling away has brought salvation to the Gentiles, how much more would their returning to the Lord bring? How awesome would that be? But at the same time, you don't hold them in any higher esteem. And this is what I like about the Bible. This is one of the things that makes the Bible believable. Because if it was written by homeboys for homeboys, this would not be in there. This would just be simply a pamphlet about the great military and spiritual victories of Israel. No, God is so awesome in that He shows His people in the light that they really are. So that we don't worship Jews. We don't worship the nation of Israel. And as if everything that they do is so glorious. No, some of the stuff they do is horribly rotten and scandalous. And I love the fact that the Lord puts this story in there. And this is how He ends the book of Judges. Hey, don't worship the Jews. Worship the God of the Jews. Because the reality is there's a lot of Jewish people that don't even know their God in a saving way. Because Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no man comes to the Father but through me. No Jesus, no Father. Sorry. I went off there for a second. The old man said, peace be with you, verse 20. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square. We know when that happens, there's something. Stephen King also says, when there's a gun on the table in the first act, it's going to go off in the third act. That's the gun on the table. Hey, by the way, don't sleep in the square. Come into my house. And that's just creepy. That's like M. Night Shyamalan creepy. So he brought him into his house, and he gave fodder for the donkeys, and they washed their feet, and they ate, and they drank. And as they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men from the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came in, the man who came into your house, so that we may know him carnally. The only other time we see this in the Bible is Sodom and Gomorrah. But the man, the master of the house, went out to them, and he said to them, no, my brothers, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing that this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage. Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Humble them. Of course, we all know what that means. And do to them as you please, but this man, do not do such a vile thing. Can I say this? People often say, what does the Bible have to say about homosexuality? And I always answer with this. The Bible says that you should not have sex outside of marriage. Of any type. Guy with a guy, guy with a girl with a girl. You shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. Okay? Now, our nation is trying to change all that by saying, well, then let's just redefine marriage. That's why it's such an evil thing. People go, I don't know, man. I know these two gay guys, and they're really cool, and they help me do this thing in my lawn, and it was like, I love those guys. Those guys are great. You know what? I think all they really need is just to be happy. Let those guys be happy. Why you got to be throwing your rules on them? Because the Bible says it's evil. It's evil. I would much rather take the passive route on this. I would much rather go with the flow for my own personal safety and just say, oh, you know what? I just don't want to cause no problems, and that stuff gets in the way of the gospel. And really, the gospel is about love. No, man, the gospel is about the word of the Lord. Because otherwise, where's their martyrdom? Where's their saying, you know what? I would die for this. I would make a stand for this, and I would die for this because this is the right thing, and that's the wrong thing. Let me tell you, here's one of the ways that we can see what the Bible has to say about homosexuality. Okay? It would be better for you guys. Now, this isn't the opinion of this old man from Ephraim, okay? But basically what he's saying is it would be better for you to rape these 2 girls than for you to sleep with that guy. Did I read it wrong? But the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, I'm not advocating rape. You know this, right? You understand that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you had to draw a degree, this man is saying, look, here's my virgin daughter, and here's the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Humble them. Do with them as you please, but do not do such a vile thing. The intent is this. It would be more vile for you to sleep with that guy than for you to rape these 2 girls. You say, well, the Bible is so sexist. That's not the point. It's not saying that if you ever have a group of homosexuals that want to rape you, throw out your virgin and your concubine. They're not saying this is how to deal with this deal. They're just saying that this is how vile that this is in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 25, but the men would not heed him, so the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. The virgin didn't go out, interestingly enough. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house. You know what? They raped her and they didn't kill her. And that's what's so sad. Right? To add sorrow on top of sorrow. They didn't kill her. And she shows back up to the house. But where's her husband? Is he waiting up for her? Is he standing out there? Is he crying he can't stand to see the sight of what's going on out there in the streets and in the alleys? No. It seems like he just went to sleep. Because it seems that when she showed back up to the door, that he would have been there to open it up and to bring her in. Now, perhaps this Levite felt like she kind of got it coming to her. Because why in the world is he there anyway? Because I'm chasing you because you're a harlot. And sometimes it's like, hey, you get what you pay for. If it's between a virgin and a woman who's played a harlot against me, let's offer up the harlot first. The Bible doesn't say that. I'm just saying, what kind of logic is bringing them to these decisions? In any of this, do you see seeking the Lord? Have we missed that? Let's not miss that. Has anybody here so far sought the Lord? No. These are men doing what seems right in their minds. And it kind of seems right on one level, but then it's completely vile on the other level. It's kind of right, but then it's kind of horrible. Like it's horrible that you would take a concubine instead of just making her your wife. But it's noble that you would go look for her. It's horrible that you would leave at this time, but at the same time it's noble because you don't want to take up this guy's hospitality too much. You don't want to be there too long. And it's horrible that these men want to sleep with these guys, but in a way it's kind of weirdly noble that they didn't actually sleep with that guy and they slept with these girls. And you understand how it is? It's like it's kind of justifiable. I remember Chris Rock one time, the great theologian, talking about O.J. Simpson. And the whole point of his bit was that, hey, if you went to a restaurant and you saw your ex-wife buddying up with a waiter, and then later you saw them go back to his house, and then later you saw that they stayed there late, and then he pauses and he says, I'm not saying O.J. should have killed his wife. I'm just saying I understand. This is that kind of story. In one sense, it's like, oh, I understand. It's jealous rage. It's my ex-wife with another man. But on the other hand, it's like, what? It's murder. It's horrible. It's terrible. And now here we have this situation. The woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. And when her master arose in the morning, which makes you think that he just went to bed, take my concubine harlot with you, and then just when you're done with her, bring her back. He opened the doors of the house and he went out to go his way, and there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house. Which makes you wonder whether or not he thought that he's never going to see his concubine again. I mean, he's going out to go his own way, and there she is, right there at the doorstep. He went out to go his way, and there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. I want to step back for a second, back to Deuteronomy 6 and 7, when it talks about taking this law, and I want you to attach it to the doorpost of your home. What should have been on the doorpost of that home? Should have been right there. There's a threshold, and then right there on the doorpost should have been what they call a mezuzah. And inside the mezuzah should have been a passage of Scripture, which basically talks about, you go to any Jewish home, any religious Jewish home, and you go up there, and right there to the right, you see it standing right there. It's a mezuzah. And you touch it. Right? A lot of times people kiss it. It's usually got a shin on it, a Hebrew letter, which stands for Jerusalem. And there she is, hand on the threshold. If I hated Israel, I would love this chapter. Because it's just so evil in all of its imagery. And he said to her, "Get up, let's be going." Oh, how tender. How caring. But there was no answer, so the man lifted her onto his donkey. And the man got up and he went to his place. And when he entered his house, he took a knife and he laid hold of his concubine, and he divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and he sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was that all who saw it, said, no such deed has ever been done from the day the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it. And confer and speak up. Why did all this happen? Well, in Leviticus 19, verse 1, and it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. There was no authority. Hosea 9:9 speaks interestingly here. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea. Hosea 9:9. Hosea 9 is titled Judgment of Israel's Sin. And so we realize that this is not just the only instance. This is not the only time that Israel had gotten to this point of idolatry, that they had just so left the Lord. Hosea 9:9 says, "They are deeply corrupted as in the days of Gibeah. He will remember their iniquity. He will punish their sins." Hosea 10:9 says pretty much the same thing. "O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah." And there they stood. The battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. Think about this again. "O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah, and there they stood, the battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them." What is he saying there? Number one, he's saying that there's about to be a battle in Gibeah, and that it didn't completely destroy them. Chapter 20 is sort of a long chapter. There's not a lot of commentary, so we're going to read through it because it's mostly just describing a battle. Judges chapter 20, Israel's war with the Benjamites. "So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, as well as from the land of Gilead." Why? Because this guy had taken his concubine. Once he got back to the mountains of Ephraim, he went home with her on his donkey. And then when he got back home to the mountains of Ephraim, which, by the way, is where the ark was, which is where the tabernacle was sitting, because that's where he said that he was going to worship the Lord. He cuts her up into pieces and sends her pieces, 12 pieces, all over Israel. And this is why these men, so all the children of Israel, because they all had received a really bizarre package. So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, as well as from the land of Gilead, and the congregation gathered together as one man before the Lord at Mizpah. And the leaders of all the people, all the tribes, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and then the children of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wicked thing happen?" So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "My concubine and I went into Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the many men of Gibeah arose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. And they intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died." Well, that's not completely the whole story, is it? He kind of gets the right to tell the story because the lady who could have told the other story is dead. And the old man who could have told the other story is back in Gibeah. And the servant is probably not going to say nothing to nobody. And so he tells the truth, but kinda. And so in that sense, what is he doing? He's literally bearing false witness. And he's telling it in such a way that doesn't shine. I mean, after all, the tragedy is the dead woman. The tragedy is not really my decisions that I made which put her into jeopardy. I don't know if you see that or not. If you're a woman here, you should not be very happy towards this Levite. Verse 4, so the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "My concubine and I went to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah arose against me, surrounded the house that night because of me. They intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died. So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. Look, all of you are the children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel here and now." Are they seeking the Lord? No. Why? Because it's a time when there was no king and every man did what was right in his own mind. Don't worry, the Lord will show up. So all the people arose as one man, saying, "None of us will go to his tent, nor will any turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. And we will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, 1,000 out of every 10,000, to make provisions for the people, that when they come to Gibeah in Benjamin, that they may repay all the vileness which they have done in Israel." So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one man. Okay, we get it, as one man. But at this point, they're united as one man, doing the things which men think that seems right to them at the time. And so far, we still haven't seen anyone consulting the Lord. That's why it's so important when we teach our children the Pledge of Allegiance that we don't leave out that very important part, which is what? One nation, right, not as one man. But rather, we are one nation under God. That's what makes us indivisible. Because our unity does not stand in our humanistic collective thought. But the unity which unifies Americans should be that we are one nation under the authority of the Lord. Does this make sense to you? Because if we lose it, we lose the application. Verse 12, and then all the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What is this wickedness that occurred among you? Now therefore deliver up the men, the perverted men who were in Gibeah." Did they want them to all just kill themselves? Because if you're a Benjamite right now, we want you to die. No. Did they want to kill everybody who was in Gibeah? No. What did they want? We just want you, number one, to see the outrage which has happened. And number two, we want you to deliver to us the perverted men in your community. Basically, purge out those men who were obviously perverted. And that's what makes Benjamin's response so outrageous. Now therefore, verse 13, deliver up the men, the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the children of Israel. We would rather align ourselves with these few wicked men than to admit that there's sin in our camp. Even a little tiny, teeny, weeny bit of sin. Compared to all of Benjamin, there's just a few men who have committed this outrage. No, we're gonna side with the perverted guys, those few guys, and we'll go to war against you in order to protect them. You want to talk about how evil is that? And yet we look at this day and age, and we see people walking away from courtrooms obviously guilty. Why? Well, because you know what? We have to protect the rights of those people. You mean the lady that murders her kid? Or you mean the guy that killed his wife? Those people were, why? I'm sorry, at what point did the right come in? It should be obvious. Is it? No, see, because we have to protect, it's like, you understand what we're saying here? We're not too far off of this. We would rather side with the rights of the most evil among us than make a stand to admit that we truly are one nation under God's authority. No, we would rather coexist and not cast judgment on pretty much anybody as opposed to existing under the authority of the Word of God. This is where we live. This is the nation we're living in right now. Unless I'm just talking out of the side of my neck. Verse 15, and from their cities at that time, instead the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. And from their cities at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 7,000 select men. Among all this people were 700 men who were left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. Why is this important? Well, because if anybody understands the Air Force or they understand tactical fighting, you realize that if you're right-handed, you got your sword in your right hand and you've got your shield like this. So you're going into battle like this, right? But if you're left-handed, you're going into battle basically prepared to fight another guy who's got the opposite setup. And so you're thinking, well, it should be even. He's kind of back here with his sword, and then I'm back here with my sword. And then when you put them together, you realize it's a fair fight. But when you got these guys that are left-handed and they're throwing the sling, which allows the sling to go maybe about as far as that microphone is from my hand or further, and he's left-handed, that means that this guy who's right-handed is leaving, and he's going into battle like this. What's he doing? He's leaving this ear right here exposed. If you're left-handed, you got a direct shot to shatter that ear. So they had him at a tactical advantage. The children of Israel, verse 17. Now, besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of war. And the children of Israel arose, and they went up to the house of God finally to inquire of God. And they said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah first. Well, that's interesting because in Judges 1, when they went up against Ai and they asked the Lord who should go up to battle first, who did he count? Judah should go first. Okay, we're not going to get into the nuances as to why Judah was first. But the point being is that the people of Benjamin at this point were as wicked in the eyes of the Lord as the people of Ai had been. And now all of a sudden the battle looks exactly like the battle of Ai. As a matter of fact, tactically, it's going to end up exactly as the battle of Ai. So the children of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. Oh, by the way, when they first started taking the land, when they went across, they said, who should be the first one to take their land? The Lord says, Judah should be the first. Now, in a second, it's going to look like the battle of Ai. So the children of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin. And the men of Israel put themselves in battle array to fight against them at Gibeah. Then the children of Benjamin came out to Gibeah, and on that day they cut down to the ground 22,000 men of the Israelites. And the people said, that is the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and again formed the battle line at the place where they had put themselves in array on the first day. Then the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord. First they just asked him who should go first. Then they got defeated. Now they go to him and they're weeping. Until evening, and they asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I again draw near for battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? And the Lord said, go up against him. So the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day, and cut down to the ground 18,000 more of the children of Israel, and these drew the sword. Then all the children of Israel, that is, all the people who went up and came to the house of God and wept, they sat there before the Lord, and they fasted that day until evening, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet again go into battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. This raises an interesting conundrum, an interesting problem that we have to suss out in our own life of faith. Have you ever sought the Lord and said, God, should I do thus and such? Should I take this job? Should I go to this school? Should I date this person? And you feel like the Lord say, go for it. And you're like, okay, that means success. Well, not necessarily. Because maybe that would always mean success if He was finished working on us. But do you understand that with every defeat, guess what happened? Israel cried out even more to the Lord. First, they just seek the Lord. Okay, God, we're going to go into battle. So, you want us to do this? Yeah, Judah first. Then they get defeated. Then they come to Him and they don't say, okay, now who should go first this time? Because that didn't work last time, Lord. No, they go to Him and they weep before Him. They're broken. They're being humbled. You have to understand, it's not just Benjamin who was evil in the eyes of the Lord. They're all evil in the eyes of the Lord because they've all departed. They've all played the harlot with the Baals and the Ashtaroths, and they've all compromised their faith. And so God is like, yeah, here's your defeat. It's not just a punishment for your sin. It's like, I'm drawing something out of you. And sometimes we ask the Lord, is this a green light? And the Lord says, it's a green light. And we're like, okay, we're certain this is a green light for the Lord. And let's go do this business venture. And then all of a sudden, the thing just closes shop within 6 months. We lose our house to foreclosure. We lose our job. We lose our credit. We lose our reputation. And then we come back and we're licking our wounds and we're like, God, where were you? I was out there busting my hump, and where were you, God? You said, go for it, and look what happened to me. And don't think you don't think that when those things come true. They say, should we go do it again? Yeah, go for it again. He never actually promised victory until the third time. So maybe we should pray better? No. The point is that every time they got defeated, they cried out to the Lord. There's that saying, Lord, just take these troubles away from me. And sometimes you wonder if the Lord's not like, well, let's see, when it was good times, you never prayed to me. And now it's hard times, you pray to me all the time. Man, we have the great conversations. We talk for hours. You don't have a job anymore, so you wake up in the morning, you walk for an hour and a half, and you wonder about what to do, and you're talking to me. And why would I want that to stop? Why would I want it to go back to the old way? Am I not providing for you? Yeah, but Lord, I used to have a big TV, and now I just have like a little TV. And now I used to have a car that, it was a BMW, so it was free maintenance until I got ready to sell it. And so now I got a Corolla, and, I'm just praying for it, Driving that neon. You know what that means? Knee on the steering wheel, knee on the dash. There's no room in this car. Knee on the windshield. So finally they go to him and they seek him, they fast. What are they doing? They're doing all the things they should have been doing all along. They're denying themselves. They're seeking the Lord. They're humbled. Guess what? Now they're ready for a victory. You see, when you walked out there and you had the overwhelming force and you guys all had your bravado and you had your battle yell and you had all your stuff like that, if you had won right there, you would have looked at each other, high-fived each other and said, now look what we did. We put Benjamin in their place. But now, it's more like a fair fight. And now you're demoralized. And now Benjamin has the upper hand. If you win now, I get the credit. What I like is the fact that he mentions the high priest. Hebrews chapter 10 says that we got a better high priest than Phinehas. We got a better high priest than Aaron. We have one who stands on our behalf and pleads on our behalf. Shall I yet again go into battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? I'm sure they were thinking, God, have we lost because we're sinning against you by fighting against Benjamin? Because if we really win and we're really ticked off right now, we will eradicate Benjamin. It reminds me of after David sinned with Bathsheba and Nathan came to him and he says, hey, the Lord's going to judge you for this. And he's like, well, what's it going to be? And he gives him like 3 options. Do you remember that? He gives him like 3 options. You could have famine. You could have an enemy nation come against you. Or you can have like 3 days of judgment from the Lord. Remember that? And he's like, I'll take the 3 days of judgment. Why? And his answer was very plain. Because I would rather fall into the hands of an angry God than fall into the hands of an angry mob. And man, Benjamin had better be thanking the Lord that at the very end God says, I am going to give you victory. Why? Because they didn't fall into the hands of a fickle cousins, but they fell into the hands of God. And with God there is grace, where men would never have shown grace. Verse 30, and the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the 3rd day, and they put themselves in battle array against Gibeah, as at other times. So the children of Benjamin went out against the people and were drawn away from the city, and they began to strike down and kill some of the people, as at other times in the highways. This is verse 31. One of which goes up to Bethel, and the other goes to Gibeah, and in the field about 30 men of Israel. And the children of Benjamin said, they are defeated before us as at first. But the children of Israel said, let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. So all the men of Israel rose from their place. What did they do? They set up an ambush. You see the same thing as they fought against Ai in Joshua chapter 8. And they put themselves in battle array at Baal Tamar. And then Israel's men in ambush burst forth from their position in the plain of Geba. And 10,000 select men from all of Israel came against Gibeah. And the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not know that disaster was upon them. That's the way it always is for the worldly. When Pharaoh was about to overtake Israel at the Red Sea, he thought, victory is upon me. And God even said to Israel, stay here and be silent. That's not always His command, but for that particular moment, stay here and be silent, because right now this isn't about you and Pharaoh. This is about me and Pharaoh, so that the fullness of my wrath may fall upon him. Why? Because I have to let him believe in his mind that he has conquered the God of Israel by conquering the people of Israel. And so I got to let him get like this close to killing you. And then darkness came between them and confused them. The Bible says that Pharaoh had overtaken Israel at the shores of the Red Sea, and then darkness came and confused them, but stood between them, and then the Red Sea opened, and then there they went, and then the dark cloud opened, and they said, look, let's go catch them. We can go through just like they're going through. And then as we know how that happened. In the same way, he let Benjamin get that close to feeling like they had won, only to lift the cloud. You see the smoke coming up, they turn around, and now they're completely defeated here before they're ever defeated here. Why? So that the fullness of the Lord's wrath can be shown on them at that time. And there's a day which is coming, which you could be rescued from. There is a Red Sea parted for you, if you would simply take it And it comes in the form of putting your faith and your trust in Jesus. So all the men of Israel arose, and they put themselves, verse 33, in battle array at Baal Tamar. And then Israel's men in ambush burst forth from their positions at the plain of Geba. And 10,000 select men from all Israel came against Gibeah. And the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not know that disaster was upon them. The Lord defeated Benjamin. Who defeated Benjamin? The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And the children of Israel destroyed that day 25,100 Benjamites. All these drew the sword. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel had given ground to the Benjamites because they relied on men in ambush whom they had set against Gibeah. And the men in ambush quickly rushed upon Gibeah. The men in ambush spread out and struck the whole city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise up from the city, whereupon the men of Israel would turn in battle. Now Benjamin had begun to strike and kill about 30 of the men of Israel, for they said, surely they are defeated before us, as in the first battle. But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, which has to remind you of the column of smoke, which they followed through the desert for 40 years, Israel. The Benjamites looked behind them, and there was the whole city going up in smoke to heaven. And when the men of Israel turned back, the men of Benjamin panicked, for they saw that disaster had come upon them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. But the battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities was destroyed in their midst. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah towards the east. And 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All these were men of valor. And they turned and fled towards the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. And they cut down 5,000 of them on the highways. And they pursued them relentlessly up to Gidom, and killed 2,000 of them, so that all who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they stayed at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. Oh, interestingly enough, when was 4 months? That was exactly the amount of time that the Levite waited before he went to rescue his concubine who had played the what? The harlot. Now you see Benjamin has run away. Why? Because really their defeat came because instead of seeking the Lord, they played the harlot and they sided with perverted men instead of siding with the word of the Lord. Now 4 months later, Benjamin the harlot, now just as the Levite went to rescue his harlot, now you see the Lord come and you'll see Benjamin become rescued, if you'll wait just a moment. You see, we see a cycle here. We see turning away from the word of the Lord, and now there's offense. And because of the offense, now what we have is we have punishment for sin. But because we serve a gracious God, the men of Benjamin are not going to go the way of the men of Sodom. Why? Because the word of the Lord endures forever. And he says this, while judgment may begin at my house with my people, I will not leave them or forsake them. So we see the offense, which leads to an outrage, which leads to punishment. But God in his gracious mercy now comes and provides for them so that they will not be completely eliminated. That's why there's Christians who say, hey, Israel, modern Israel should not even exist today. And I say, really? Because I'm pretty sure that there was not like a post date on the promises of the Lord. Well, they don't deserve it. Well, so neither did the Benjamites. It's not a question of who deserves what. Do we deserve salvation, that we could stand in such lofty judgment against Israel? No. We're recipients of God's grace by his promise of his word. If he forsakes Israel, we better be running, baby, because he'll forsake us. Why is it that we can believe in his forever promises, but they can't? Well, that's Old Testament. This is New Testament. This is it's the word of the Lord. It's all the word of the Lord. Show me which part of this is not the word of the Lord. Yeah, there's an offense. And even when they let him go, when he let them go into Canaan, he says, I'm telling you right now, you're not going in here to dispossess these people of their land because you're great and spiritual and you're perfect. No, you're going in here because of my word to your fathers. Now, you follow me and don't turn to the right or to the left. And now we see them turning to the right, to the left, to the backwards. They're doing backflips over the fence. Man, have they messed up. And yet still we see God's grace, and in that is a message of hope for us and for anyone who believes. Verse 21, chapter 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. This is the problem with when men don't seek the Lord. And they make these rash vows. We saw the same thing with Jephthah, remember? He's like, I'm telling you right now, whoever comes out of my house, whatever it is, goat, male servant, female servant, I'll offer it up to the Lord. And what comes out but his only daughter? Don't make rash oaths, because the Lord will hold you accountable to those. None of us shall give his daughter to a Benjamite as a wife. And then the people came from the house of God, and they remained there before the Lord until evening, and they lifted up their voices, and they wept bitterly. And they said, O God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? Did God say that they were never going to grow up to be a tribe again? No, but when you see only by your sight, and you don't seek the Lord, then you only see the things that men can see. That's why we walk by faith and not by feelings. We don't walk by sight. We walk by faith. God never said that one tribe was missing. But the men of Israel said it. Why has this come to pass in Israel that today there should come a tribe missing in Israel? And so it was on the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And you wonder, even then, where is the tabernacle? The children of Israel said, who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with the assembly of the Lord? For they have made a great oath concerning anyone who would not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, he shall surely be put to death. Basically, any of you tribes that don't come fight with us against Benjamin, we're going to kill you if you don't show up. Everybody shows up but one. And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin, their brother, and said, one tribe is cut off from Israel today. And what do we do for wives, for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters as wives? And they said, well, what one is there from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to the Lord? And in fact, no one had come to the camp from the camp of Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out from there 12,000 of their midst, valiant men, and commanded them, saying, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including the women and children. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male, every woman who was known a man intimately. So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Once again, horrible contradictions. Who didn't come up to fight with us against these Benjamites? Well, the people from Jabesh Gilead didn't show up. Okay, let's kill every one of them, so that we can provide wives for these men whom we had sworn to kill every one of them. That's jacked up. That's a Hebrew word, jacked up. But once again, when men try to make decisions without seeking the Lord, these are the kind of convoluted things that come up. And we see them in churches, and we see different various strains and denominations of Christianity and these things and that. And if you're a person who reads the Bible, you can walk in, fold your arms, and by the end of the service go, that was of the Lord, that was of the Lord, that was of man, that was of man. And then you have to determine, am I going to come here again? Because was there enough of the Lord that I can put up with of man? And you just name the denomination, pretty much every one of them you go to, and you go, that's of the Lord, that's of the Lord. That's weird. That's not even in the Bible. That's of the Lord. It's like, and then you have to determine which one am I going to go to. And this is what happens. And some of them are way more better examples of what man could do messing up church. And that's not the point of what we're doing here tonight. They utterly destroyed every male. So verse 12, so they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who did not know a man intimately, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. And then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin, who were at the rock of Rimmon, and announced peace to them. Hey, you guys get peace because we slaughtered this whole village and we took their virgins, and now you can have their virgins. I don't know how it happened, but, we're allies with West Germany now, and now the communism has fallen. We're allies with Germany. But my grandfather remembers a time when we hated those guys. We wanted to kill every stinking German we could see. We wanted to kill the ones that were over here. It's interesting how men are with forgiveness. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be friends with Germany. I'm just saying there's a modern example of there was a time we wanted to kill every one of them, and now, I remember one time I said to my grandfather, I said, hey, I'm thinking about buying a Honda. And he goes, oh, great. You spent half my life trying to kill those guys, and now we're buying compact cars from them. Now, that's the old man. That's what old men, they're old cranky old men. I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying there's a time when you can utterly hate a people, and then at the same time, just a few years later, hey, détente. We're importing, we're exporting, we're doing life with these people. It's like, well, okay, can we get back to the root? Whatever changed about the thing that we hated? Oh, so we really probably maybe shouldn't have hated them that much? Or what did, it's confusing. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon and announced peace to them. So Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women from whom they had from whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead, and yet they found not enough for them. We just don't have enough virgins around here. And the people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a void in the tribes of Israel. Are you serious? You're seeking the Lord just a chapter ago. Lord, help us defeat these people. And now what are they doing? Now they're griping because the Lord has made a void. And the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for the wives, for those who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed? And they said, there must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. I don't know. I saw the Lord where He whittled a huge army down to just 300 guys, and they had an amazing defeat. I think, if you just left it up to the Lord, He could probably take those 400 virgins and do amazing things of restoration. But these guys come up with another way. I love it when guys do God's business. However, we cannot give them wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn an oath, saying, cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. Well, the last thing we're going to do is ask for forgiveness for that oath. And then they said, in fact, there is a yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, the south of Lebanon. Therefore, they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. And just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and then go to the land of Benjamin. And then it shall be, when the fathers of their brothers come to us to complain, that we shall say to them, be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for any of them in the war. For it is not as though you have given these women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty of your oath. You didn't technically give them to them. We just told them to lay in wait, because there are some virgins of some guys who vowed that they can't give you a wife. But if you lay in wait and these women go up to do their dances, just run out there and grab you one. And we technically didn't give them to you, so therefore we're innocent before the Lord. Hey, don't you love it when man starts because what happens when you depart from the word of the Lord, then all of a sudden you got to come up with religion. And religion is a big, humongous word, which means this is how I'm going to justify this thing in my life. And this is how I'm going to control these people. That's why you make religion. When it's the word of the Lord, it's the Lord speaking, and you obey it. But when it's a guy is either trying to control a group of people by putting a bunch of rules on them, and they got to keep coming back to him in order to learn the rules. Is there another rule? Yeah, you got to fast for 5 days now. Okay, you're the one great one. You have all the answers. He either wants to control people, or he develops a religion which basically says that, yeah, no, seriously, I believe in a trajectory hermeneutic, which means that the Bible set things into motion. But now society has evolved to the point where now the Bible is flexible and it can morph into these other things. And so now it's totally okay to sleep with your girlfriend. It's just during that time, it would have been bad because they didn't have pills for like venereal disease and stuff. And people do that. That's why they create religion to either control people or they create it in order to allow things for themselves that the Bible didn't allow. Okay? So they come up with this whole thing. They went into the vineyards, verse 21, and watched, just as when the women of Shiloh came out to perform their dances. Then they came out of the vineyards, and every man caught a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and then go to the land of Benjamin. And then it shall be when their fathers or their brothers come out to us to complain, that we will say to them, be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife from any of them in war. For it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty for your oath. The children of Benjamin did so. They took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught, and then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt the cities, and they dwelt in them. So the children of Israel departed from there at that time, every man from his tribe and every family. They went out from there, every man to his inheritance. Don't lose the gravity of this line. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. The ultimate perversity is to become your own God and to do what is right in your own eyes. To try to be your own Savior, to try to be your own truth, to try to be your own judge. And whenever creation does that and it puts together an unholy trinity, the number of creation is what? 6. How many days did it take to create the world? 6. So when you see man becoming his own trinity, then you see what? You see the spirit of Antichrist. You see 6. You see 6. You see 6. And you're no longer trusting in the Lord, but you're doing it all yourself. Is it not true that we see this in our lives today? Interestingly enough, there was no king in Israel. The book of Ruth begins with the story of a man whose name was Elimelech. Elimelech. It means what? It means God is my king. There was no king in Israel, and yet the book of Ruth starts with God is my king. Elimelech.